Now adjust the volume control so that the sound can be heard in all parts of the room.
This is the Protect Your Assets podcast.
You get the idea?
Bring me a dream.
It's on the internet.
Make him the cutest that I've ever seen.
Go on.
Give him two lips like
It's like no cheese I've ever tasted.
and tell him that his love
Here's the Sandman.
over, Sandman.
Are you ready to call it quits and move on to a new job? Don't make a big mistake. Listen to our entire show today as I'll go over what happens to all those important benefits you've accrued. It's all coming up next, so stick around. Good morning. I'm David Hollander, your host, and this is Protect Your Assets. For those of you just joining us for the first time, welcome. People around here, they call me the Sandman, and that's because I help my listeners sleep well at night by answering their most troubled legal and financial questions each week. And that's because I manage a tax, legal, financial planning firm, and we've been doing this for well over 30 years now. We are live today, or you can always email me a question anytime you want, 24 hours a day. I love these questions. Go ahead and send any question to questions at PYA. PYA stands for Protect Your Assets, PYAradio.com, and be happy to answer it, maybe even on the air. Listen, doing something for the first time, something you've never done before, it can be thrilling, but it can also be kind of scary and it can be expensive. I'm not talking about skydiving. I'm talking about quitting your job and moving on to another job. Not sure what to do or what steps you should be taking before you do that? Well, what do you do with your 401k? Do you have an HSA account? Do you have any PTO or sick time that's unused? Can you even afford to leave your job? These are all really good questions, and it all got me thinking this week. We did a workshop Thursday, and I had Dave come up to me after, and he'd been working for a very well-known company. It's been in the news lately a lot. Very well established, and he'd been there for over 25 years, and he was wondering if he's going to be laid off as part of the 10% of people that are laying off, and so he's actively thinking about leaving now. So if you love your job or you're thinking about moving on to a different one, don't leave these questions unanswered. You're tuned into the right place today, because I'll be sharing ready to call it quits. Well, here's what happens to your company benefits. Don't do this blindly. Listen closely to the entire show as we'll get into it. Now, let's get started. Well, the S&P 500, if it closes like it's doing right now in 2024, this will be, get this, the fifth time in 75 years that we've had back-to-back S&P 500 performance for the year being over 20%. Think about that. Could there be a three-peat coming in 2025? Well, let's look at the numbers. The Dow closed the week up 1%. The S&P was up again 0.9%. NASDAQ up 0.8%. The international index off a little bit, down 0.8%. Still up year-to-date 7.3%. The 10-year Treasury closed at 4.08%. And oil down a little bit this week, down almost 9%, closing at $68.80 a barrel. And bonds this week were flat, not much going on there. We're sitting right now on the S&P 500 up about 23%, NASDAQ up 23.2%, and the Dow's getting real close to being up 15% year to date. I don't think that the next 3 to 4 weeks, if you will be as smooth as we've seen to this point. So again, this might be a time to take a look at your portfolio. We are getting close to the end of October, and tax season will start coming around. Remember, in 2024, you've got a little bit of time to do some things to lower your taxes. Last week, we did meet with John. John had a lot of gains in his stocks, and he really didn't know what to do. So we got a hold of his CPA, and we all got on the phone, and we looked at his positions and decided we would be selling off some of those stocks now, realizing some of those long-term capital gains, because in his tax bracket, he could get up to $90,000 of income from capital gains and pay 0 capital gain tax. You heard me right. So if you're sitting on, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 capital gain, and your income really isn't that much, you might want to take advantage of that current tax law before it changes at some point, because we never know when that'll change. But right now we know what it is, so you've got a couple months to do some things right there, and that might be a great opportunity to pay literally zero capital gain tax on that stock. You've made all that money. Want to quit your job? Well, check your 401k employer match first. We're going to go through a list right now of things you want to do before you quit to make sure you don't leave any money on the table. So if you're like Dave, remember I was talking about Dave, he worked for a very well-known Dow company that has announced they're going to be laying off about 10% of their workforce. He's been there about 25 years. He has a young child, and he's about to have another child. And he's just worried about his future and what's going to happen. So he had a 401k, and if you have a 401k, your employer, like Dave's, may have added money on your behalf. This is what's called matching. I'll give you an example. The company may provide, say, 50 cents for every $1 that you save in that 401k, up to, say, 6% of your salary, your annual salary. This is what Dave had. Let's say that Dave was earning $100,000 a year, and he went ahead and he put away in his 401k in 2024 about $6,000. The full 6%, in other words, 6% of $100,000 is $6,000. So in this case, Dave's employer would contribute $3,000 as a match per year into his 401k. So I said to Dave, hey Dave, before you leave, I would recommend you check to see if your plan includes what's known as a vesting requirement. Vest, he said? What's a vest? Not something you wear. We're talking about vesting. This means how do you actually acquire it? How do you own it? How do you change it from theirs to yours so you can keep that extra $3,000 a year that your employer has been stashing away into your account? Because it's not just yours just because it shows up on the statement. So Dave's going to go ahead and talk to his HR, in this case, not his finance department. It's another place you could check. Usually your HR or finance department has this information. But he's going to ask his HR for a copy of the plan document, which again you can ask for. Get a copy of the plan document. And in that document, you're going to see a section which will talk about the vesting schedule. Again, write that down, the vesting schedule. You want to learn about that because it will describe how you access that benefit. Now, if you're unsure about this, you can definitely check in with the HR and ask how that works, or you can always reach out to us and ask us, how does it work, or what should you do? 866-PROTECT is the number. Just call 866-PROTECT and we're happy to go over that with you. Now, coming up in our next segment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through what are the types, because there are different types of vesting schedules. Now, you may get that document and it'll say you have this type of vesting, and it won't really explain it, but it'll say that's the type. And so how does it work? What does it mean? Well, when I come back, we're going to get into the vesting schedules on your 401k and find out how you can keep more of that money that could be yours. So you are listening to the Protect Your Assets show. I am David Hollander, also known as the Sandman. We'll be right back.
Take the first step toward reaching your financial goals and get the information that can help you live a confident retirement. That first step is going to pyaevents.com and signing up for our next free event. That's pyaevents.com. Now, back to Protect Your Assets with David Hollander, the Sandman.
Welcome back. I'm David Hollander, also known as the Sandman, and you are listening this morning to Protect Your Assets. And people call me the Sandman. That's because I help you keep more of your money by answering your tax, finance, and legal questions each week. And that's because I've been running a tax, legal, and financial firm for a little over 30 years. If you're just joining us today, well, we're talking about what you need to consider before you quit your job. You don't want to leave any money on the table, so find out what you need to know. I was talking before the break about Dave. Dave came up to me last Thursday night. We had done an event down in our Southern California office in Newport Beach. Dave came up to me after, and he told me that he had been working for a very well-known Dow Industrial Company, one of the big 30. And they've announced lately that they're going to lay off about 10% of their workforce. Now, Dave has been working for this company for over 25 years. He's married. His wife is a little bit younger than him, and they're expecting another child. And he's worried. He's worried about how he's going to continue to pay his standard of living and college and all these sort of things. And Dave's a real smart guy. And so he's wondering about possibly looking for another job before they just lay him off, because he's pretty sure he's going to get laid off, and he doesn't want that to happen. So we started talking about his benefits, and in the previous segment I was talking about his 401k and some things he needed to know about something called matching. And so then we started talking about some other things that go along with matching. So I explained to him that there's something called vesting, and this is a process through which he gradually takes ownership of any payment that was put into his 401k made by his employer, because your employer has the ability to match or put funds into your account if the plan so calls for it and if you meet some of the requirements that they lay out in the document. So in Dave's case, it involved becoming an owner of these employer contributions to his 401k. And Dave's retirement plan vesting followed what was called a time-based schedule, meaning that if he were to quit, which is what he's thinking about doing, or if he gets laid off before a certain period has passed, what ends up happening is he gives up that money that the employer put into the plan. It's like it just vanishes one day. You know, you look in the account and you see it one day and the next day it's not there, and you say, whoa, what happened? Well, it's because you didn't meet the vesting schedule. So vesting doesn't apply to your contributions, Dave. Those are yours. You put it in the retirement plan, that's your money, and your employer cannot take that back. But when it comes to matching benefits, you need to find out the vesting schedule, because that's going to determine if that money is yours or if you're going to lose it, it's going to go back to them. So as we talked more about this, I explained to Dave that there are really two approaches for what's known as time-based vesting. The first approach is what's known as a cliff schedule, just like jumping off a cliff. Think about it like this. It's all or nothing, right? Very similar to jumping off a cliff. If you quit your job before working the number of years that the employer requires, you lose all. That's right. You lose all 100% of those employer contributions. However, once you pass that threshold, you get to keep everything. Alternatively, your plan may use what's known as a graded schedule. Think about this like climbing up a mountain. It unlocks a percent of your employer's matching contributions for every month or year, depending on what that mountain looks like as you climb it. And this is all described in the plan design. So if your plan follows, say, a 4-year graded schedule, imagine that literally like a cliff as you're walking up the mountain, 4 levels of climbing, you unlock 25% of those contributions made by your employer before you get to keep the whole thing after 4 years. So let me give you an example. Let's say you receive $1,000 a year from your employer for the retirement plan, and after 2 years you have $2,000 showing up on your statement, and this came from your employer as an employer contribution. You then quit. If your plan uses a 3-year cliff, you're going to forfeit all $2,000 because you haven't reached the 3-year limit yet. But if your plan uses a 4-year graded schedule, not the cliff, you keep 50% of the employer contribution, again 2 out of 4 years. So in this case, you're going to leave about $1,000 on the table, and you get to walk with $1,000. Now you need to clear the plan vesting requirements only once. After you reach the required years of employment, any future employer contribution is 100% yours. So I let Dave know that there are federal rules that cap the amount of time that the workplace retirement plans can require you to stay with an employer to become fully vested. Those rules, well, 3 years is the longest a cliff vesting schedule can last, and 6 years is the longest period a plan can use the graded schedule. Another rule that Dave has to think about, well, you have to be fully vested by the time you reach the target retirement age listed in your plan. This is a little tricky, so follow this one. For instance, if your 401k lists a target retirement age of, say, 65, and you join the plan at age 63, you'll be fully vested within 2 years when you turn 65. However, in Dave's case, Dave's 58 years old. So if Dave's plan states age 65, then he wouldn't reach that age on time, especially if he's going to be leaving now. However, he might meet it with the other requirements we talked about earlier, and because he's been there 25 years, it's more likely than not that he's in pretty good shape. But again, you don't know until you look at the document and you go through this exercise to figure out where you are. Now, what happens if your employer shuts down? In this case, it may not happen, but we hear about this a lot, where the employer goes bankrupt or shuts down. Let's say the employer shuts down the retirement plan. You immediately become 100% vested for all past employer contributions if your employer lays off more than 20% of employees participating in the retirement plan. All affected employees are fully vested, and employees who are not laid off are still subject to the standard vesting schedule rules. Now, Dave immediately said, well, what about the 10%? They've announced they're going to do 10%. Yeah, I wonder why. There you go. So next I asked Dave if he knew what his options were with his benefits at work. Dave said, like what? Like what other benefits could I have? And I said, well, we talked about your 401k. And remember, with the 401k that you contributed to, these are your contributions, you could leave the money typically in the old employer's plan. A lot of my clients say, I don't want to do that because I don't trust them or I don't like them. You also might be able to roll that into an IRA at a different custodian. You also might be able, Dave, to roll that into your new employer. So when you get that new job, you might be able to move it from the old employer to the new employer's 401k. Or you might want to just withdraw it while you're looking for another job. I let him know that any withdrawals could face ordinary income taxes plus an early withdrawal penalty since he's under the age of 59 and a half. I told him to check with his HR at both employers to confirm what his options would be and think about the trade-offs if he were to do any of the different results that are there. There's all sorts of results we don't have time to talk about today, but you can go back and listen to some of my past shows on our podcast to find out more about IRAs and 401ks and some of the protections, after all, this is protect your assets, that go along with some of those accounts. I next asked him if he had a health savings account. This is known as an HSA. And I let him know that he might be able to leave the money in his old account, or he could possibly roll it over to a new HSA provider. Again, I asked him to check with his HR for details on that, but the money is Dave's, even if he left his job. So there's really no rush to spend that money, though you won't be able to make additional contributions if you're no longer covered by that HSA health plan. And I encouraged him into looking into investing that and considering using it much later in life for, say, long-term care, because that money will come out tax-free. We then discussed his flexible spending account. This is known as an FSA. I let him know that this money is typically use it or lose it, meaning that any money left in the FSA when he leaves his job will be forfeited back to the employer. So again, I asked him to check with his HR for the details on that plan, and he should consider spending all that money on qualified medical expenses before his very last day of work. Otherwise, he could just lose all that money. Are you thinking of changing jobs, say, in the next 6 months? Well, if you are, don't leave any money on the table. I have a checklist right now that I'll give you for free this morning. You just have to call this number, 866-PROTECT. The number to call to get yours is 866-PROTECT. This is a way you can go through and just check off the things, make sure you're at least following the procedures to find out what's rightfully yours. Go ahead and call someone on my team right now. Phil standing by, 866-PROTECT. Talk to a team member here, 866-PROTECT. Coming up next, it's time for our popular They Say segment, where they say once you leave your company, you lose your PTO. Is that true? And where should you get your medical and health care while you look for a new job? Find out. You certainly don't want to miss this one. You're listening to Protect Your Assets with David Hollander, the Sandman. That's me. We'll be right back.
Take the first step toward reaching your financial goals and get the information that can help you live a confident retirement. That first step is going to pyaevents.com and signing up for our next free event. That's pyaevents.com. Now back to Protect Your Assets with David Hollander, the Sandman.
Welcome back. I am David Hollander, and people around here, they call me the Sandman. That's because I help you keep more of what's yours. And if you're thinking about leaving work, well, this morning we've been talking about how you do just that, especially with all those special benefits you might have. You don't want to leave any money on the table, so make sure you tune into the entire show. And that song, I'm just thinking about the Eagles in Vegas. If you get a chance, I would highly recommend you get over to the Sphere. It was quite a show and really, really excellent. So if you're an Eagles fan, get over there and check it out while they're still around. Are you ready to call it quits and move on to your next job, or maybe ease into retirement? Not sure what to do or what steps you should take. After all, there may be some hidden pitfalls in there if you're not careful. Like, what do you do with your 401k? What happens to any unused sick time or your PTO? Can you afford to leave your job? Listen, even if you love your job, don't leave these questions unanswered. You're tuned into just the right place, because today we're sharing Ready to Call It Quits? Here's what happens to your company benefits. Don't go at it blindly. Listen closely to this entire show as we get into it. Now it's time for one of our fan favorite parts of the show, our They Say segment, where we debunk common myths, half-truths, and sometimes, well, just bad advice that they say.
Who are they? What do they know that I don't? And what are they saying this week? Here's David Hollander, the Sandman's answer.
All right, so here's one they say. They say that once you leave your company, you lose your PTO. Is this really true? And where should you get your health care in retirement? Well, this is really interesting. The answer actually depends on what state you live in, believe it or not. In California, it's required, of course, that companies pay employees for their unused PTO when they leave the company. So what is exactly unused PTO? Well, unused PTO is paid time off that you have earned while working at the company, but you haven't used it yet. There are no federal or state laws that require companies to offer PTOs to their employees, but many businesses choose to have a PTO policy to improve their employees' well-being and job satisfaction. So a company's PTO policy may include vacation leave, sick time, holidays, personal days, family or medical leave. Many companies have policies that allow employees to accrue PTO by hours, days, weeks, or pay periods. For example, an employee could earn, say, 5 hours of PTO every 2 weeks. Some companies allow employees to accrue more PTO the longer they stay with a company. For example, employees may earn, say, 4 weeks of PTO per year during their first 5 years with the company, and then earn 5 weeks of annual PTO after 5 years. Now, I was talking about Dave earlier. David approached me, and this was at a workshop Thursday night, and asked me all these questions about his job, and PTO was certainly one of the issues that had come up. And his company had policies around unused PTO. Again, that's the buzzword, unused PTO. And so here were some common examples that Dave and I talked about. And so you may want to write these down because you may have one of these types of options, and you need to know this language, if you will, to unlock your benefits. So the first example I can talk about is something called an accrual cap. Some companies limit how much PTO Dave can accrue while he works for his company. For example, Dave's company could allow him to earn no more than 4 weeks of PTO at one time. After he would have reached that 4 weeks, he can't earn any more PTO until he uses some of that time. So that's known as like a cap. The other one, which is also kind of interesting, is something called an accrual rollover. And Dave's company could have this option where it carries over any accrued unused PTO. For example, let's say at the end of 2024, his company allows him to roll over any time that he didn't use into the next year. And some companies will roll over these policies without limit for years and years and years. So when Dave decides to leave, which is very likely in this case, and he's been working there for 25 years, he might have accrued a substantial amount of benefit that will have to be paid out because it's been rolled over, if that makes any sense. The other type of example that what you should think about or find out if this is what you have, again, before you were to leave, would be what's known as the use it or lose it policy. In contrast to the accrual that I was just talking about, or a rollover policy, the use it or lose it one requires Dave to take his PTO during a specific time frame. If he can't use it or he doesn't use it, then he's going to forfeit those hours. And his company could require him to use those 3 weeks by the end of this year. And if he doesn't, well, then he's just going to lose it. And that would be obviously pretty terrible because he's been there for so long and accruing so many benefits. So that's how that PTO typically works. And then the next topic that was related to that is his health insurance. And that's the first thing he asked me, because remember, Dave is married and he has a child, a young child right now who's in school, and his wife is pregnant and they're expecting a baby here in the next 4 to 5 months. And so he's worried about his health care. And so we started talking about his health insurance gap coverage. If he were to quit and was unemployed for a while, what would he do for coverage for his wife, particularly because she's about to have a baby in the not too distant future. So I asked Dave how old he was, and he was under 65, and that's important because if you're quitting your job and you're under the age of 65, you could try to gain coverage through, in this case, his spouse's employer, because she was working, but she was on leave for a bit now. But he could try to get coverage through her employer. I also mentioned he could elect COBRA, because what's going to happen when he leaves work is his company will send him a letter regarding COBRA benefits. This lets you stay on your old employer's health insurance for up to 1.5 years. But I did warn Dave, I said, hey, this probably will be more expensive than you're used to, because it sounds like in your case, your employer was actually paying most of the monthly premium on your policy as part of your benefit. And once you're no longer working there, then you have to pay the entire premium. And so just expect that to go up, because typically COBRA is full cost for that coverage. And that could be an option until you find yourself a new job. I also mentioned he should probably shop around for a policy. He could buy a policy for himself and his family through the public marketplace. This is also known or was established by the Affordable Care Act. And in California, you've got a lot of references on that subject about California care that you could check out. Some people even qualify for government-provided subsidies for these plans through something called a premium tax credit. Another option is to look to your local health insurance agent, trade or professional association, and any other private exchange that offer plans from multiple carriers. Now, Dave was under 65, but had he been 65 or older, Dave could certainly have applied for Medicare, and Medicare has all kinds of options, and right now it is open enrollment season, so this is a great time if you are retired or thinking about retiring to actually shop and look at what's available because plans change each and every year, and we have found through our clients working with a professional that they sometimes save quite a bit of money on a monthly basis on things that they didn't really need. So always take a look at your policy at least once a year. If you found any of this information helpful today, then just imagine what we can help you accomplish when we give you advice that's tailored to you. If you boil it down, our mission at the Liberty Group is to help you protect your money and your lifestyle so you can remain financially independent. Wouldn't it feel great to know that you can retire right now with consistent and stable income and do what you want to do without the constant worry in the back of your mind if you have enough or if you've saved enough? So if you feel like you just need someone to talk to, well, pick up the phone and give me a call right now. My number is 866-PROTECT. You can remove that gray area wondering right now if you can do this. Get a copy of this checklist I've been talking about. We're giving that away now. 866-PROTECT. Again, my number, 866-PROTECT. Keep it tuned right here, because when we come back, I'm going to share how not considering this last issue could force you to wind up regretting your decision. The answer is coming up next. We'll be right back.
If you missed any of Protect Your Assets with David Hollander, all you have to do is go to pyaradio.com, where you can download or listen to our latest shows for free. Just go to pyaradio.com on your computer or mobile device when it's most convenient for you. That's pyaradio.com. Now back to Protect Your Assets with David Hollander, the Sandman.
Welcome back. I am David Hollander, also known as the Sandman, and you are listening to Protect Your Assets this morning. People around here, well, they call me the Sandman, and Dave came to me at the workshop Thursday night and wanted to know how to protect his benefits that he's been accruing at work after 25 years. And so we had a pretty good discussion about all the things that he needed to consider. Are you ready to call it quits and move on to your next job, or maybe ease into retirement? Well, if you're not sure what to do or what steps to take, then you've tuned into the right place this morning, because we're sharing ready to call it quits. Well, here's what happens to your company benefits. That reminds me, if you missed any of today's show, go listen to our podcast wherever you get your favorite podcast. And if you like it, please share it with a friend. Just search for Protect Your Assets wherever you get your podcasts, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. Today we're talking about what to do if you're about to quit your job, and this could be the big one that you may not think about. So if you're lucky enough to have a pension, Dave had a pension, a defined benefit pension, in fact. This was with his current company. There was 4 options that he had, and he wasn't really sure how this all worked. So we went through them. The option number 1, well, he could leave that pension with the previous employer and elect to take a periodic withdrawal directly from the plan and then live off of that. And he would appreciate that in this case, because he has a baby on the way, he has a child at home, he has a wife who right now is not working full-time anymore, and so he wanted to make sure he had payments on a monthly basis that were indexed to inflation. And so we had to look into his DB plan, it's called, to see what the mortality risk might be, because he and his spouse might not live long enough to collect the full commuted value, is what that's called. Again, these are some terms you need to find out about. Option 2, he could transfer that to his new employer's plan, possibly. So transfers between defined benefit pensions are possible in theory, but I find these are relatively rare due to the dwindling number of employer DB plans that are out there. The other option he has is he could annuitize it with higher rates today, and any worry that your old company might become insolvent, they're particularly all over the news right now, and that's why they're laying people off. You, Dave, might be able to use a special life insurance product known as a copycat annuity, which qualifies for a tax-deferred transfer of the pension's commuted value, and the annuity would mirror the benefits that you would have been entitled to had you stayed with your current plan. Or you could always go with what's called the cash out option. This is where you take control of the investment decision by transferring that savings in the pension plan to a registered account, a tax-deferred retirement account, such as a IRA or something known as a LIRA, locked-in retirement account, without any tax consequences. You can essentially roll that over. So I know there's a lot to think about, right? With the stock market being at all-time highs right now, the question is, when are things going to start to come back down again, or what's going to happen in the future? These are all unknowns, and if you're thinking about retiring, maybe you're having these same sort of questions, and you're wondering if your plan can sustain any kind of volatility that we might experience here in the near future, particularly if you're going to shift like Dave is, and he doesn't want to worry about having to make a bad decision. He wants to see it now before he does anything. After all, he's an engineer. So if you have questions and they're not getting answered, maybe you feel like Dave does, or you have that feeling, you know the one? Well, you can remove the gray area right now, wondering how to make your money last and how to create that consistent month-to-month income that you're looking to build as you enter the next phase of your life. Feel better about your financial independence by taking action now. You can get a complimentary 15-minute virtual checkup with a fiduciary by calling this number. Pick up the phone now. Call this number, 866-PROTECT. The number to call, 866-776-8328. Again, one more time, 866-776-8328. Schedule a personal one-on-one meeting and find out more about what you may or may not know. I'd like to give a big thanks to the Protect Your Assets team for putting together a great show today. We had executive producer and network manager Kevin Renfer, and of course all my fabulous producers back there answering the phone, Phil, Dylan, Adrian, Lucas. Thanks, guys, because without my team, I'm just another pretty voice on the radio. You have been listening to the Protect Your Assets show. I am David Hollander, the Sandman. Have a great weekend. Go out and make the rest of your life the best of your life.
Investment advisory services are offered through Liberty Wealth Management, a registered investment advisor. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. The strategies mentioned are not suitable for everyone. The information expressed does not consider your specific situation or objectives and may not be appropriate for all investors. Past performance is not indicative of future results. To better understand the risk associated with investing and how it reacts to different market conditions, listeners should always consult with their qualified investment professionals, financial advisors, legal or tax specialists, and conduct their due diligence before making any financial decisions or taking any action. The legal information provided on the air is not intended to substitute for callers hiring their lawyers to advise them about personal legal matters. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Liberty Group LLC paid for the following program, and the host's views and opinions do not represent those of the station or its ownership. California Life Agent number 048569. Persons engaging the services of one affiliate of Liberty Group LLC companies should be aware that each company is operated separately. You're listening to the Protect Your Assets Radio Network.